Zuri Brown's heart thudded in her chest as she moved silently through the grand dining room, her polished shoes whispering against the hardwood floor. Her hands, calloused yet gentle, gripped the handle of a feather duster, but her mind was elsewhere. The Malibu mansion, where she'd worked as a maid for the past year, was usually a place of quiet routine. But today, something felt off. It was in the air, a subtle tension that prickled her skin like static before a storm. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 2:15 p.m. Alexander Bennett, the billionaire tech mogul who owned this sprawling estate, wasn't due back from his business trip for hours. That left Zuri, as always, with the weight of keeping the household running smoothly, especially for Lily, the 8-year-old girl who had stolen her heart. Lily Bennett was a spark of light in the mansion's sterile opulence. Paralyzed from the waist down after a car accident that had also claimed her mother, Claire, Lily navigated her world with a wheelchair adorned with butterfly stickers and a smile that could melt the hardest heart. Zuri had grown fiercely protective of her, spending her breaks reading stories or helping Lily sketch butterflies, her favorite obsession. But lately, Zuri had noticed a shadow creeping over the girl's bright blue eyes, a flicker of fear that hadn't been there before. It gnawed at Zuri, a quiet dread she couldn't shake. As she dusted the mahogany dining table, a sharp cry sliced through the silence. Zuri froze, her pulse spiking. It was Lily's voice, high and trembling, laced with a desperation that made Zuri's stomach lurch. The sound came from the adjacent sitting room, a space rarely used except for formal gatherings. Zuri's instincts screamed to run, but caution held her back. She crept toward the arched doorway, her breath shallow, and peered through the gap between the heavy velvet curtains. In the dim light, she saw Margaret Voss, Alexander's stepmother, towering over Lily. Margaret's face, usually a mask of polished charm, was twisted with contempt. Her designer heels clicked ominously as she circled Lily's wheelchair like a predator sizing up its prey. Lily, her small frame hunched in the chair, clutched a spilled water glass, her cheeks streaked with tears. "You clumsy, useless burden," Margaret hissed, her voice low and venomous, each word a lash. "Look at this mess. Do you know how much that rug costs? More than you'll ever be worth." Zuri's breath caught, her hand tightening around the duster until her knuckles ached. She wanted to burst in, to shield Lily, but her feet felt glued to the floor, rooted by a mix of shock and fear. Margaret, the poised woman who'd swept into the family after Claire's death, had always seemed cold. But this was cruelty distilled into words. Zuri's heart pounded as she noticed Lily's trembling hands, her tiny fingers gripping the wheelchair's armrests as if they were her only anchor. I'm sorry, Margaret," Lily stammered, her voice barely above a whisper, cracking with shame. "I just wanted water. I didn't mean to." Her words cut off as Margaret's foot lashed out, striking the wheelchair's frame with a sickening thud. The chair tipped violently, and Lily, caught off guard, tumbled to the floor with a cry that pierced Zuri's soul. The glass rolled away, water pooling on the expensive rug. Lily's small body curled instinctively, her sobs muffled as she pressed her face to the floor. Zuri's vision blurred with rage and horror. Her hands shook, the duster slipping from her grasp, but she forced herself to stay hidden, her mind racing. Margaret wasn't just angry. She was deliberate, her cruelty calculated. The way she'd aimed for the wheelchair, the way her eyes glinted with something darker than frustration, it sent a chill down Zuri's spine. This wasn't a one-time outburst. This was a pattern, a secret festering in the heart of this perfect family. "You're nothing but a burden," Margaret spat, stepping closer to Lily, who flinched at the sound of her voice. "A broken little girl who'll never be anything but a problem. If it weren't for you, everything would be so much easier." The words hung in the air, heavy with malice, and Zuri felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it nearly propelled her forward, but she held back, knowing that confronting Margaret now could cost her job and her ability to stay close to Lily. Lily's sobs grew quieter, her small frame trembling as she tried to pull herself back toward the toppled wheelchair. Zuri's heart broke at the sight, her chest tight with a mix of guilt and fury. She should have seen this sooner. The way Lily had started avoiding Margaret's gaze, The way she'd grown quiet when the woman was near. It all made sense now. Zuri's eyes darted to the mirror above the fireplace, catching Margaret's reflection as the woman smoothed her blonde hair, her face shifting back to its usual composed mask. The sudden change was chilling, as if the cruelty had never happened. Zuri slipped back into the dining room, her breath uneven, her mind a storm of emotions. She couldn't let this stand, but she had to be smart. Margaret held power here. Alexander's trust, the household's loyalty. Zuri, just a maid, was an outsider in this world of wealth and privilege. But Lily wasn't. Lily was the heart of this house, and Zuri would be damned if she let that light be snuffed out. She waited until Margaret's heels clicked away, the sound fading toward the upstairs. Then, moving quickly, Zuri entered the sitting room, her heart lurching as she knelt beside Lily. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice soft but steady, masking the rage still burning in her chest. Lily looked up, her blue eyes wide with fear and shame, but they softened at the sight of Zuri. "I'm sorry, Zuri," Lily whispered, her voice thick with tears. "I didn't mean to make her mad. I was thirsty." The words were a knife to Zuri's heart, the way Lily blamed herself for Margaret's cruelty. She gently lifted Lily, her arms strong and sure, and settled her back into the wheelchair, checking for any injuries. A faint red mark bloomed on Lily's arm where she'd hit the floor, and Zuri's jaw clenched. "You didn't do anything wrong, Lily," Zuri said firmly, brushing a strand of golden hair from the girl's tear-streaked face. "You're perfect just the way you are. And I'm here, okay? I'm not going anywhere." Lily's lip trembled, but she nodded, her small hand reaching for Zuri's. The trust in that gesture, fragile yet fierce, made Zuri's resolve harden like steel. As she wheeled Lily to her room, Zuri's mind churned. She couldn't confront Margaret directly. Not yet. She needed proof, something undeniable to show Alexander the truth about his stepmother. But more than that, she needed to protect Lily, to shield her from the venom that had already begun to poison her spirit. Zuri's heart ached with the weight of it, the knowledge that this little girl, who loved butterflies and dreamed of flying despite her broken wings, was living in fear in her own home. She tucked Lily into her favorite armchair, surrounded by sketchbooks filled with butterfly drawings. "You rest, sweetheart," Zuri said, her voice a soothing balm. "I'll clean up the mess. No one's going to hurt you while I'm here." Lily's eyes, still red from crying, held a flicker of hope, and Zuri clung to it like a lifeline. As she left the room, Zuri's hands curled into fists, her mind racing with a single burning thought. Margaret's cruelty would not go unanswered. She didn't know how, but she would find a way to protect Lily, to expose the monster hiding behind that polished facade. For now, she would watch, wait, and listen, her heart heavy with the promise she'd made to a little girl who deserved so much more than this hidden cruelty. Zuri Brown's heart pounded as she retreated from the sitting room, the sting of Alexander's dismissal burning in her chest. She clutched the cleaning cloth tightly, her fingers trembling with a mix of anger and helplessness. Lily's tearful eyes, wide with unspoken fear, lingered in her mind, urging her to act despite the risk. The memory of Margaret's calculated cruelty, pushing Lily's wheelchair until she fell, the venom in her words, fueled Zuri's resolve. She couldn't let this go, not when Lily's safety hung in the balance. But Alexander's trust in his stepmother was a wall she hadn't breached, and Zuri knew she needed to tread carefully in this house where her voice carried little weight. In the kitchen, Zuri busied herself with scrubbing pots, the clatter of metal grounding her racing thoughts. She needed a plan, a way to make Alexander see the truth without endangering her position or Lily. The mansion was quiet now, save for the faint hum of conversation from the living room where Alexander sat with his daughter. Zuri's ears strained for any sign of Margaret, whose absence felt like a predator lurking just out of sight. She glanced at the clock. 4:30 p.m. Alexander would likely stay with Lily for a while, giving Zuri a narrow window to act. She slipped into the hallway, her steps silent, driven by a gut feeling that Margaret's cruelty extended beyond what she'd seen. As she passed the study door, still ajar from earlier, her pulse quickened. The room was empty, but the desk bore signs of disturbance. Papers slightly askew, a drawer left open. Zuri's breath hitched. She'd seen Margaret photographing documents last night, her movements furtive, her expression cold. Those weren't household records. They were Alexander's business files, the kind that could ruin a man like him if they fell into the wrong hands. Zuri's mind raced. Margaret wasn't just abusing Lily. She was after something bigger. Determined to try again, Zuri returned to the living room, where Alexander was helping Lily color a butterfly in her sketchbook. His face, softened with love, made Zuri's heart ache. He was a good father, but his blind trust in Margaret was a chain around them all. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach, "can we talk privately? It's important." Alexander looked up, his brow furrowing, a flicker of irritation crossing his features. But Lily's small hand touched his, and her quiet, "Please, Daddy," softened his gaze. "All right," he said, standing. "Let's step outside." He wheeled Lily to her nanny, who had just arrived for her evening shift, and led Zuri to the quiet hallway. Zuri's heart thudded as she faced him, his imposing frame towering over her, his eyes searching hers for answers. "What's this about, Zuri?" he asked, his tone clipped, but not unkind. "You've already raised concerns about Margaret. I said I'd handle it." Zuri swallowed, her hands clasped tightly to keep them from shaking. "It's not just what I saw today," she said, her voice low but urgent. "Lily's scared, Mr. Bennett. She's not herself when Margaret's around. I saw a mark on her shoulder from when Margaret pushed her wheelchair. And last night I saw Margaret in your study, taking pictures of your documents. I don't know what she's planning, but it's not right." Her words spilled out, each one a gamble, her eyes pleading for him to listen. Alexander's face tightened, his jaw clenching as he processed her words. "That's a serious accusation," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Margaret's been family since Claire died. She's helped us through the worst of it. Why would she do something like that?" His tone was defensive, but Zuri caught a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a crack in his certainty. Before she could press further, Margaret's voice slithered into the conversation, smooth and sharp as a blade. "Alexander, darling, is everything all right?" She appeared at the end of the hallway, her smile radiant but her eyes cold, locking onto Zuri with a glint of warning. Zuri's stomach twisted, but she held her ground, her chin lifting defiantly. "Just a misunderstanding," Alexander said, his gaze shifting to Margaret. But Zuri saw his hesitation, the way his hand flexed at his side. "Zuri's concerned about Lily," he added, his voice neutral but probing. "She mentioned something about a mark on her arm, and you're in my study." Margaret's laugh was light, almost musical, but it sent a shiver down Zuri's spine. "Oh, Zuri, you're so dedicated," she said, her tone dripping with false warmth. "I was in the study looking for a pen to write Lily's therapy schedule. As for the mark, you know how easily children bruise, especially in wheelchairs. Lily's been struggling with her coordination lately. It's heartbreaking, but we're doing our best." She placed a hand on Alexander's arm, her touch possessive, her smile a perfect mask. Zuri's blood boiled, her fists clenching at her sides. "Lily didn't fall by accident," she said, her voice trembling with restrained fury. "You pushed her, Mrs. Voss. I saw it, and Lily's terrified of you." The words hung in the air, raw and accusing, and for a moment, silence swallowed the hallway. Alexander's eyes darted between them, his expression a storm of conflicting emotions. Love for his daughter, trust in Margaret, and a growing unease he couldn't shake. "Zuri," he said finally, his voice heavy, "I'll talk to Lily tonight. If something's wrong, I'll get to the bottom of it. But I need you to focus on your duties for now." His words were a dismissal, but the doubt in his eyes gave Zuri a sliver of hope. Margaret's smile tightened, her gaze boring into Zuri like a blade. "Yes, Zuri," she said, her voice sweet but laced with venom. "The kitchen's waiting. We wouldn't want to distract Alexander from his family." The threat was clear, a reminder of Zuri's precarious place in this house. As Zuri turned to leave, her heart sank, but her resolve hardened. She'd failed to break through Alexander's trust in Margaret, but she wasn't done. She glanced back at Lily, now coloring quietly with her nanny, her small face etched with worry. Zuri's chest ached with the need to protect her, to shield that fragile light from Margaret's darkness. She would find proof, something undeniable, to force Alexander to see the truth. For now she'd watch, her eyes sharp, her heart steeled. Margaret's secrets were a ticking bomb, and Zuri would be the one to defuse it, or light the fuse. Zuri Brown's heart thrummed with a quiet fire as she slipped into the attic, her flashlight cutting through the dusty air. The weight of her promise to Lily, to protect her from Margaret's cruelty, pressed against her chest, urging her forward despite the risk. She'd overheard the groundskeeper mention this forgotten space, where Claire, Alexander's late wife, had stored personal belongings before her death. If there was any clue to unravel Margaret's sinister intentions, it might be hidden here, among the relics of a life stolen too soon. Zuri's hands trembled as she knelt before a worn cardboard box, labeled in Claire's elegant script. Her breath caught. Inside were journals, letters, and faded photographs, each a whisper from a woman whose absence haunted the mansion. She opened a leather-bound journal, her pulse quickening as Claire's words spilled across the page. The entries were tender at first, filled with love for Lily and Alexander, but they darkened with suspicion. One passage stopped Zuri cold. Margaret's visits feel wrong. She's too interested in my medication, always hovering when I take my pills. Her questions about Lily's trust fund linger like a bad taste. I fear she sees my daughter as a means to an end. Zuri's fingers tightened on the journal, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and validation. Claire had sensed danger, had seen through Margaret's polished facade before it was too late. Her thoughts were interrupted by the faint buzz of her phone, a text from Lily's nanny. "Lily's asking for you. She's shaken." Zuri's stomach twisted, her mind flashing to the 8-year-old's fragile frame, her blue eyes shadowed by fear. She tucked the journal into her apron, her resolve hardening, and hurried downstairs, her steps silent but urgent. In Lily's room, the girl sat in her wheelchair, clutching her butterfly sketchbook, her face pale, her small hands trembling. The nanny excused herself, leaving Zuri alone with the child, whose vulnerability pierced her heart. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Zuri asked, kneeling beside Lily, her voice soft but steady. She brushed a strand of golden hair from the girl's face, noting the way her lip quivered, her eyes wide with a fear she was trying to suppress. Lily's voice was a whisper, barely audible. "I heard Margaret talking on the phone again, in the library this time. She didn't see me in the hallway." Zuri's heart skipped, her hand gently squeezing Lily's. "What did she say?" she urged, her tone calm but urgent, her eyes locked on the girl's. Lily's gaze darted to the door, as if expecting Margaret to appear. "She was angry," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "She said something about clearing the path and how the girl's trust fund is the key. I think she meant me, Zuri." The words hit Zuri like a blow, her chest tightening with rage and fear. Margaret wasn't just cruel. She was plotting something far more dangerous, something tied to Lily's inheritance. "She mentioned a man named Richard," Lily added, her fingers fidgeting with the sketchbook's edge. "She said he'd handle things if she got the money soon." Zuri's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. Richard, a name tied to Margaret's schemes, a shadow in her plans. She forced a reassuring smile, masking the storm inside her. "You're so brave for telling me, Lily," she said, her voice a soothing balm. "You noticed something important, and that's going to help us." Lily's eyes flickered with a spark of hope, but fear still lingered, etching lines of worry into her young face. "What if she finds out I heard her?" Lily whispered, her voice cracking. "She'll be so mad." Zuri's heart ached, her protective instincts flaring. "She won't find out," she promised, her voice fierce with conviction. "We'll be careful and we'll keep you safe." She paused, an idea forming, risky but necessary. "Lily, do you know how to use the voice recorder on your tablet?" she asked, her mind racing with possibilities. Lily nodded, her fingers brushing the device on her lap. "I record my butterfly stories sometimes," she said, a small smile breaking through her fear. "Good," Zuri said, her lips curving into a determined smile. "Next time Margaret's near you and you feel safe, try turning it on. Just hide it in your lap like you're playing a game. Can you do that?" Lily's eyes widened, a mix of nervousness and determination crossing her face. "I think so," she said, her voice steadier now. I want to help. For Mommy. The mention of Claire sent a pang through Zuri's chest, the journal in her apron suddenly feeling heavier. You're helping so much already, Zuri said, squeezing Lily's hand, her heart swelling with pride and pain. She could see the courage in the girl's eyes, a strength that belied her fragile frame. Your mom would be so proud of you. Lily's lip trembled, but she nodded, her small hand tightening around Zuri's. The trust in that gesture was a lifeline, anchoring Zuri's resolve. As she helped Lily settle into bed, tucking the sketchbook beside her, Zuri's mind churned. Claire's journal, Lily's overheard conversation, the name Richard. These were threads in a web Margaret had woven, and Zuri was determined to unravel it. She didn't know the full scope of Margaret's plans, but the pieces were starting to form a picture, one that chilled her to the bone. Margaret wasn't just a cruel stepmother, she was a predator, and Lily was her target. Zuri closed Lily's door softly, her heart pounding with a vow. She would protect this girl, no matter the cost. The journal was a start, but she needed more. Proof that would force Alexander to see the truth, to break the spell Margaret had cast over him. As she moved through the silent hallway, her eyes sharp, her senses alert, Zuri felt the weight of her mission settle over her. Margaret's secrets were a ticking clock, and Zuri would be the one to stop it before it was too late. Zuri Brown's pulse thrummed with a mix of hope and dread as she stood outside Lily's room, her hand lingering on the doorknob. The journal she'd found, filled with Claire's suspicions, burned in her apron pocket, a silent call to action. Lily's whispered revelations about Margaret's phone call had sharpened Zuri's resolve, but the weight of confronting Margaret loomed like a storm cloud. She needed Alexander to see the truth, to break free from the trust that blinded him to his stepmother's cruelty. As she moved toward the dining room to finish her evening tasks, her ears caught the low murmur of voices. Alexander's, steady but strained, and Lily's, soft and hesitant. Zuri's heart lifted. He was talking to his daughter just as he'd promised. She paused, her cleaning cloth still in hand, and edged closer to the living room door, her breath shallow. Alexander knelt beside Lily's wheelchair, his broad frame softened by concern, his green eyes searching his daughter's face. Sweetheart, he said, his voice gentle but urgent, you can tell me anything. Is something bothering you about Margaret? Lily's small hands clutched her butterfly sketchbook, her knuckles pale. Her eyes darted to the doorway, catching Zuri's for a fleeting moment, a silent plea for strength. Zuri nodded, her heart pounding, willing the girl to speak. I don't like when she's mean, Lily whispered, her voice trembling but clear. She says I'm a problem, Daddy, and she pushed my chair once. It hurt. The words hung in the air, raw and heavy, and Zuri saw Alexander's face tighten, a flicker of pain crossing his features. His hand reached for Lily's, but before he could respond, Margaret's voice sliced through the room, smooth and sharp. Alexander, darling, what's this about? She glided in, her blonde hair flawless, her smile a mask that didn't reach her eyes. Zuri's stomach twisted, her fingers tightening on the cloth. She stepped into the room, her presence a quiet defiance. Mrs. Voss, she said, her voice steady despite the fire in her chest. Lily's telling the truth. I saw you push her wheelchair, and I know about other things. Things you've done that aren't right. Her words were a gamble, bold and direct, her eyes locked on Margaret's, searching for a crack in her composure. Margaret's smile faltered, a flash of something cold, fear perhaps, crossing her face before she recovered. Zuri, you're overstepping, she said, her tone icy but controlled. You're a maid, not a family member. Accusing me of hurting Lily is absurd. She's a child, prone to exaggerations. She turned to Alexander, her hand resting lightly on his arm, a gesture that felt possessive. Darling, you know how much I care for Lily. This is just a misunderstanding. Alexander's jaw clenched, his eyes darting between Margaret and Lily, whose face was pale with fear. Zuri, he said, his voice low, you mentioned something about my study last time, and now this. What exactly are you saying? His tone was a mix of skepticism and unease, a crack in his trust that Zuri seized upon. I'm saying Lily's scared, Zuri said. her voice firm, her heart racing. And I found something. Proof that Claire was worried about Margaret before she died. She reached into her apron, pulling out the journal, her hands steady despite the weight of the moment. Claire wrote about Margaret's questions, her strange behavior. She didn't trust her, Mr. Bennet, and neither should you. She held out the journal, her eyes pleading for him to take it, to see the truth. Margaret's face paled, her composure slipping for a heartbeat before she laughed, a brittle sound that grated on Zuri's nerves. A journal? Really, Zuri? You're digging through Claire's old things to stir up trouble? Alexander, she's trying to tear us apart. Her voice was smooth, but Zuri caught the tremor in it, the desperation beneath her calm. Alexander took the journal, his fingers brushing the worn cover, his expression a storm of conflicting emotions. Grief for Claire, love for Lily, and a growing doubt that gnawed at his trust in Margaret. I'll read it, he said finally, his voice heavy. But Zuri, you need to be careful. These are serious accusations. His eyes met hers, searching, and Zuri saw the battle within him. His heart torn between his daughter's fear and the woman he'd relied on since Claire's death. Margaret stepped closer, her smile tightening. Alexander, you can't possibly believe this nonsense. Zuri's just confused, maybe jealous of her place in this house. Lily's been emotional lately. It's her condition, you know that. The way she said condition dripped with pity, and Zuri saw Lily flinch, her small hands gripping the sketchbook tighter. Stop it, Zuri snapped, her restraint breaking. Lily's not the problem. You are. Her voice trembled with fury, her eyes blazing as she faced Margaret. I know what I saw, and I know you're hiding something. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Alexander's gaze hardened, his hand tightening on the journal. Enough, he said, his voice a low growl. I'll talk to Lily alone tonight, and I'll look into this, everything. He turned to Margaret, his expression unreadable. If there's truth to any of this, Margaret, I'll find it. His words were a warning, and Zuri saw a flicker of fear in Margaret's eyes, quickly masked. Margaret's smile returned, brittle but intact. Of course, darling. You'll see it's all a misunderstanding. She shot Zuri a look that promised retribution, her eyes cold as steel. Zuri, the dining room needs your attention. Let's not keep you from your work. Zuri nodded, her heart pounding, but she held Margaret's gaze, refusing to back down. As she left the room, she glanced at Lily, whose eyes shone with a mix of fear and hope. Zuri's resolve hardened. She'd struck a blow, however small, and Alexander's doubt was a crack in Margaret's armor. Later that night, as she polished silverware in the kitchen, she overheard Alexander on the phone, his voice low but firm. I need a private investigator. Dig into Margaret Voss. Everything, from her past to now. I want answers. Zuri's heart lifted, a spark of hope igniting. Alexander was listening, even if only a little. She didn't know what he'd find, but she knew one thing. Margaret's secrets were unraveling, and Zuri would be there to pull the final thread, for Lily's sake. Zuri Brown's heart pounded like a drum as she sat in the back of a nondescript van, her hands clasped tightly to steady their trembling. The hum of Los Angeles traffic outside the children's hospital barely registered. Her focus was on the plan unfolding, a plan that could either save Lily or unravel everything. Alexander sat beside her, his jaw tight, his green eyes burning with a mix of determination and fear. The private investigator's report had landed like a bombshell. Margaret Voss was Margaret Klein, a disgraced nurse with a trail of suspicious patient deaths. Claire's journal and Lily's recorded evidence had pushed Alexander past doubt, and now with Detective Laura Hayes and an FBI team in place, they were ready to spring the trap Zuri had suggested, at the hospital's cafe, where Margaret felt untouchable. Zuri adjusted the tiny microphone pinned inside her blouse, its weight a reminder of the stakes. You sure about this, Zuri? Alexander asked, his voice low, his gaze searching her face. She nodded, her throat tight. It's for Lily, she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. She deserves justice. Alexander's hand brushed hers, a fleeting gesture of gratitude that warmed her resolve. Detective Hayes, seated across from them, gave a curt nod. We've got agents posing as staff and patrons. The cafe's wired. Get her talking, Alexander. We need her to incriminate herself. The plan was simple but perilous. Alexander would meet Margaret at the cafe, pretending to agree to her demands for a $50 million transfer to an offshore account to keep her quiet about fabricated financial scandals. Zuri would be nearby, posing as a hospital worker, ready to signal if anything went wrong. A butterfly drawing from Lily, tucked in Alexander's pocket, was their secret weapon, a way to provoke Margaret into revealing her true nature. Zuri's heart ached at the thought of Lily, safe at home with her nanny, her courage fueling this moment. Alexander stepped out of the van, his briefcase in hand, his face a mask of controlled fear. Zuri followed, her hospital staff uniform feeling like armor, as she blended into the bustle of the cafe. Margaret was already there, seated at a corner table, her blonde hair immaculate, her smile a chilling blend of charm and menace. Zuri's stomach twisted as she took a position behind the counter, her eyes locked on the scene, her pulse racing. "Alexander, darling," Margaret said, her voice smooth as she rose to greet him, her eyes flickering with calculation. "I'm glad you're being reasonable." Alexander sat, his posture rigid, the briefcase on the table a silent promise. "I want this over, Margaret," he said, his voice low but firm, laced with a feigned desperation that Zuri admired. "Tell me exactly what you want." Margaret's smile widened, her confidence palpable. "50 million wired to my account by tonight. In return, I disappear, and your little indiscretions stay buried." Her tone was smug, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Zuri's hands clenched behind the counter, her breath shallow as she watched Alexander lean forward, his voice dropping. "Indiscretions? You mean the lies you've spun about my business? Or is this about something else?" Margaret's laugh was cold, a sound that sent a shiver down Zuri's spine. "Oh, Alexander, you're so naive," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You think this is just about money? It's about control. You and that crippled daughter of yours have been a thorn in my side for too long." Zuri's heart lurched at the mention of Lily, her fingers itching to signal the agents. But she held still, trusting the plan. Alexander's hand tightened on the briefcase, his voice steady but edged with anger. "What did you do, Margaret? To Claire, to Lily? Tell me." He pulled out Lily's butterfly drawing, placing it on the table, his eyes locked on Margaret's. "Lily made this for you. She still thinks you care. Was she ever part of your plan?" Margaret's face twitched, a flash of irritation breaking her composure. "That child," she spat, her voice low but venomous, "was always in the way, just like Claire. Do you know how easy it was to slip something into her medication? She was so trusting, so weak. A few extra doses and her accident was just inevitable." The confession hung in the air, raw and damning, and Zuri's heart raced, her eyes darting to Detective Hayes, who gave a subtle nod from across the cafe. "You killed her," Alexander said, his voice a deadly whisper, his hands trembling with rage. "And you planned to hurt Lily, didn't you?" Margaret's smile turned predatory, her confidence blinding her to the trap. "Lily's trust fund was the prize, Alexander. With her gone and you out of the picture, I'd have everything. A tragic accident for a disabled child. No one would question it." Zuri's blood boiled, her hands shaking as she gripped the counter, but she forced herself to stay still, the microphone capturing every word. Alexander leaned closer, his voice breaking with feigned despair. "Why, Margaret? Why our family?" Margaret laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Because you had everything I deserved. Claire's death was my ticket in, and Lily was just collateral damage." Detective Hayes signaled, and within seconds 3 FBI agents converged, their badges flashing. "Margaret Klein, you're under arrest for the murder of Claire Bennett, conspiracy to commit murder, and child abuse," Hayes announced, her voice sharp as she produced handcuffs. Margaret's face drained of color, her eyes wide with shock as she realized the trap. "This is entrapment," she hissed, lunging toward the table, but the agents were faster, restraining her. Zuri's heart soared, relief flooding her as she stepped out from behind the counter, her eyes meeting Alexander's. His face was a mix of rage and gratitude, his hands still clutching Lily's drawing. "You underestimated us," he said to Margaret, his voice steady now. You underestimated Lily. As Margaret was led away, her venomous glare locked on Zuri, but Zuri stood tall, her heart pounding with triumph. They had her confession, and Lily was safe, for now. Zuri Brown's heart still raced as she sat in the sterile waiting room of the Los Angeles courthouse, her hands clasped tightly to steady their trembling. The echoes of Margaret's venomous confession in the hospital cafe lingered in her mind, a chilling reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. Alexander sat beside her, his broad shoulders slumped, his green eyes shadowed with a mix of relief and lingering grief. Lily, safe at home with her nanny, had recorded the evidence that had set this moment in motion, and Zuri's chest swelled with pride for the brave 8-year-old. Today they faced the final reckoning, Margaret's trial, where justice would either prevail or slip through their fingers. Detective Laura Hayes approached, her face calm but resolute, a thick file tucked under her arm. The prosecution's ready, she said, her voice steady. Lily's video testimony, Claire's journal, and the cafe recording are airtight. Margaret's got no defense. Zuri nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She glanced at Alexander, whose jaw clenched, his fingers gripping the armrest as if anchoring himself against the storm of memories. Claire's death, Lily's fear, and his own blindness to Margaret's true nature. The courtroom doors swung open, and Zuri's pulse quickened as they entered. Margaret sat at the defense table, her blonde hair still perfect, but her face was pale, stripped of its usual charm. Her eyes, cold and calculating, flickered to Zuri, a glint of defiance that made Zuri's stomach twist. But she held her gaze, her chin lifting, her heart steeled by the knowledge that Margaret's mask had been shattered. Alexander's hand brushed hers, a silent gesture of gratitude that warmed her resolve. The trial unfolded with brutal clarity. The prosecutor played Lily's recorded evidence, her small voice trembling but clear as she recounted Margaret's cruelty, words that had cut deeper than any bruise. Zuri's heart ached as she watched Alexander's face crumple, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Claire's journal was presented next, its pages a haunting testament to a mother's instincts, warning of Margaret's sinister intentions. The cafe recording was the final blow, Margaret's voice dripping with malice as she admitted to poisoning Claire and plotting against Lily. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, and Zuri saw jurors' faces harden, their shock mirroring her own. Margaret's defense attorney scrambled, claiming coercion and entrapment, but the judge's stern expression silenced his arguments. Zuri's testimony came next, her voice steady despite the weight of every eye on her. She spoke of Lily's fear, the bruise on her shoulder, and the journal that had sparked her suspicions. I couldn't let her hurt Lily anymore, Zuri said, her eyes locking on Margaret's. She's a child who deserves love, not cruelty. Her words rang out, raw and unwavering, and she saw Alexander's head bow, his hands clenching as guilt and gratitude warred within him. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on all counts: murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and child abuse. Margaret's face remained impassive as the judge sentenced her to life without parole, but Zuri caught the flicker of defeat in her eyes, a crack in her armor that felt like victory. As Margaret was led away in handcuffs, her gaze met Zuri's one last time, a silent promise of hatred that Zuri met with quiet strength. She had protected Lily, and no glare could undo that. Outside the courthouse, Alexander's voice broke the silence. Zuri, he said, his tone heavy with emotion, I was wrong. I should have listened to you from the start. His eyes, red-rimmed but clear, held a depth of remorse that made Zuri's throat tighten. You saved Lily. You saved us. She shook her head, her heart full. Lily saved herself, she said softly. She was brave enough to speak, to record the truth. I just helped her find her voice. Alexander's lips curved into a faint, pained smile. You're more than a helper, Zuri. You're family now. He hesitated, then continued, his voice firm. I want you to stay, not as a maid, but as Lily's guardian. And I'm setting up a scholarship fund in your name for kids like Lily who need someone to fight for them. Zuri's breath caught, her eyes stinging with tears she fought to hold back. The offer was more than she'd ever dreamed, a recognition of her place in their lives that warmed her to her core. That evening, back at the mansion, Zuri found Lily in her room, her wheelchair parked beside a table covered in butterfly drawings. The girl's face lit up, her blue eyes brighter than Zuri had seen in months. "Zuri!" Lily called, her voice free of the fear that had once shadowed it. "Is it over? Is she gone?" Zuri knelt beside her, her hand gently covering Lily's. "She's gone, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft but certain. "She can't hurt you anymore." Lily's lip trembled, but her smile was radiant, a spark of joy that pierced Zuri's heart. "You and Daddy did it," she said, her small hand squeezing Zuri's. "And Mommy helped, didn't she? With her journal." Zuri nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Your mom was watching over you," she said, her voice breaking. "She gave us what we needed to keep you safe." As Zuri tucked Lily into bed, the girl's eyes shone with a new strength. "I'm not scared anymore," she whispered, her fingers tracing the butterfly stickers on her wheelchair. "Because you're here." Zuri's heart swelled, her resolve now a quiet fire. She had faced Margaret's cruelty and won, not just for Lily, but for the family they were becoming. As she closed the door, her mind settled on one truth. The battle was over, but their story, Lily's, Alexander's, and hers, was just beginning. Zuri Brown's heart swelled with a quiet joy as she knelt beside Lily, her hands gently guiding the 8-year-old's fingers to plant a vibrant milkweed seedling in the soft earth. The butterfly garden, a dream born from Lily's love for the delicate creatures, was taking shape in a corner of the mansion's sprawling grounds. A year had passed since the courtroom victory that had stripped Margaret of her power, and the weight of fear that had once suffocated this house had lifted, replaced by a warmth Zuri felt in every smile Lily gave her. Alexander stood nearby, his sleeves rolled up, a rare softness in his green eyes as he watched his daughter laugh, her wheelchair parked beside a bed of blooming flowers. "Zuri, look!" Lily exclaimed, her voice bright with pride, her small hands dusted with soil. "This one's for Mommy. Monarchs love milkweed, and she'd want them to feel safe here." Zuri's throat tightened, her heart aching with love for the girl whose resilience had transformed them all. Lily's blue eyes, once shadowed by fear, now sparkled with purpose, her spirit unbroken despite the scars Margaret had left. Zuri brushed a strand of golden hair from Lily's face, her smile steady. "Your mom would love this, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft but thick with emotion. "Just like she loved you." Alexander joined them, his presence steady and grounding. "You're a natural, Lily," he said, his voice warm, a rare lightness in his tone. "This garden's going to be a sanctuary because of you." He glanced at Zuri, his eyes holding a gratitude that ran deeper than words. Since the trial, Alexander had changed. His once guarded demeanor had softened, his trust in Zuri cementing her place in their lives. She was no longer just a maid. She was Lily's guardian, her confidant, a pillar in the family they were rebuilding. Zuri's heart raced as she stood, her hands brushing dirt from her jeans. "Lily's got big plans," she said, her voice tinged with pride. "She wants to make this a safe place for other kids too." Lily nodded, her face serious despite her youth. "Kids who are scared, like I was," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I want them to know they're strong, even if someone tries to make them feel small." Zuri's chest tightened, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. Lily's courage, forged in the fire of Margaret's cruelty, was a beacon, guiding them towards something greater. Alexander's expression softened, a mix of awe and love crossing his face. "You're incredible, Lily," he said, kneeling beside her wheelchair. "And I'm so proud of you." He turned to Zuri, his voice firm with resolve. "I've been working with a foundation to fund a nonprofit for children with disabilities facing abuse. I want you to lead it, Zuri. Your heart, your strength. It's what these kids need." Zuri's breath caught, her heart pounding with a mix of disbelief and honor. "Me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You're not just anything," Alexander interrupted, his eyes fierce. "You saw what I couldn't. You fought for Lily when I was blind. This is your calling." Zuri's throat closed, emotion overwhelming her. She nodded, her vision blurring with tears, the weight of his trust settling like a warm embrace. Lily tugged at Zuri's sleeve, her smile radiant. I have something for you, she said, her small hands reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a velvet box, her fingers trembling with excitement. It was Mommy's. Daddy found it in her things, and I want you to have it. Zuri opened the box, her heart skipping as she saw a delicate butterfly pendant, its silver wings catching the light. Inside was a tiny photo of Lily as a baby, her smile a mirror of Claire's. Zuri's eyes burned, her voice barely a whisper. Lily, this is beautiful. It's because you're our family now, Lily said, her voice firm despite its softness. Mommy would want you to have it. You kept me safe, just like she did. Zuri's heart shattered and mended in the same breath, her fingers tracing the pendant as she fought back tears. She knelt, pulling Lily into a gentle hug, feeling the girl's small arms wrap around her with a trust that felt sacred. Alexander watched, his eyes glistening with emotion. Claire would be so grateful, he said, his voice thick. She always said Lily was her butterfly, fragile but fierce. You've helped her find her wings, Zuri. Zuri's chest ached, the weight of their words a reminder of the journey they'd shared, from fear to triumph, from loss to love. She fastened the pendant around her neck, its cool weight a promise of the bond they'd forged. As they returned to the house, Lily's voice broke the quiet. I'm writing a book, she announced, her eyes bright with determination. About Mommy, about how she taught me to be brave. And about you, Zuri, because you're a hero. Zuri's heart swelled, her smile trembling. I'm no hero, sweetheart, she said softly. You're the brave one. But Lily shook her head, her expression fierce. We're brave together, she said, her voice carrying a wisdom far beyond her years. That night, as Zuri tucked Lily into bed, the girl's hand lingered in hers. Zuri, she whispered, her eyes heavy with sleep. I'm not scared anymore. Because we're a family now, right? Zuri's throat tightened, her heart full to bursting. Right, she said, her voice breaking. Always. She kissed Lily's forehead, her eyes lingering on the butterfly stickers adorning the wheelchair, a symbol of the girl's unyielding spirit. As Zuri closed the door, she paused, the pendant warm against her chest. The shadows of Margaret's cruelty had faded, replaced by a light that Zuri, Lily, and Alexander had built together. They had faced darkness and emerged stronger, their bond a testament to love's power over hate. Zuri knew the road ahead would hold challenges, but with Lily's courage and Alexander's trust, they were unstoppable. Their story wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving, about choosing hope and healing in the face of pain. And as Zuri stepped into the quiet house, now a home, she felt Claire's presence, a silent blessing on the family they'd become. As the final chapter of Zuri, Lily, and Alexander's journey comes to a close, we're left with a powerful reminder. Love, courage, and truth can triumph over even the darkest betrayals. This story of a brave little girl, a determined guardian, and a father who learned to see again inspires us to stand up for those who need us most, to find strength in unexpected places, and to build families not just by blood, but by choice. What did this story stir in you? Did Lily's resilience, Zuri's heart, or Alexander's redemption touch you? Share your thoughts. We'd love to hear how this tale resonated with you. Thank you for joining us on this emotional ride, for believing in the power of hope and justice. Until we meet again, keep shining your light in the shadows.